You never expect the moment you become invisible to your own family. It doesn't come with a warning or a grand gesture, just a quiet admission that echoes louder than any argument. I felt it at my son's wedding, standing on the edge of a crowd that used to feel like home. The photographer called for the family photo, and everyone moved as if choreographed, laughter and excitement filling the air. I waited for my name. A hand to wave me in, a glance that said, "We see you." But the invitation never came. I watched as my ex-husband stood tall beside our son, his new wife radiant in her dress, her parents beaming with pride. My sister gathered the younger cousins. And the photographer adjusted everyone, calling out instructions. My heart pounded as I hovered at the periphery, certain someone would notice. But the group closed in, arms linked, smiles wide, and the shutter clicked. I stood there, hands clasped, feeling the sting of being left out settle into my bones. No one turned, no one called me over. I waited a moment longer, searching for my son's eyes, but he was lost in the celebration. The laughter felt distant, muffled by the realization that I had become an afterthought in my own family's story. My chest tightened, and I felt a flush of embarrassment. As if everyone could see the rejection written on my face, I walked away, each step heavy, the noise of the reception fading behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. I slipped out quietly, my absence unnoticed by the people I loved most. In the parking lot, I fumbled with my keys, hands trembling. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, willing myself not to cry. The ache in my chest was sharp, but I swallowed it down, refusing to let the tears fall. Driving home, the silence was deafening. I replayed the scene over and over, searching for a reason, an explanation. Had I done something wrong? Was I too quiet, too reserved, too much of a reminder of the life my son had outgrown? The questions circled endlessly, each one cutting deeper than the last. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, and tried to focus on the road, but my mind was a storm of doubt and hurt. At home, the house felt unfamiliar, as if I no longer belonged there either. I wandered from room to room, touching the framed photos on the walls. Birthdays, holidays, moments when we were all together. I wondered when the distance had begun, when I had started to fade from the center of my son's world. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, and let the loneliness settle in. My phone buzzed with messages from distant relatives, all full of joy and congratulations. Not one asked where I had gone, or if I was all right. I scrolled through the photos already posted online, the happy couple, the proud parents, the smiling guests. In every image, I searched for myself, hoping to find evidence that I had been part of the day, but I was nowhere to be seen. That night, I lay in bed, replaying every conversation, every moment of the wedding. I wondered if I should have spoken up, if I should have forced my way into the photo, made myself visible, but the thought of drawing attention, of making a scene, was unbearable. I had always tried to keep the peace, to put others first, to avoid conflict. Now, I wondered if that had been a mistake. Sleep wouldn't come. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house. I thought about my son as a little boy. How he used to run to me with his worries, how he'd squeeze my hand when he was nervous. I wondered when that trust had faded, when I had become someone he could overlook. The pain was sharp, but beneath it was something else, a resolve, a need to understand how I had arrived at this moment. In the early hours, I sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, and began to write. I wrote about the wedding, about the photo, about the way it felt to be invisible. I wrote for myself, needing to see the words on paper to make sense of the ache in my chest. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew I couldn't pretend nothing had happened. I couldn't go back to being the person who stayed silent, who waited to be seen. As dawn crept in, I folded the letter and tucked it away. My world had shifted quietly but irrevocably. I was no longer content to stand at the edge, hoping for an invitation. Something had broken, but in the breaking, I felt the first stirrings of change. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew I couldn't stay in the shadows any longer. The silence after leaving the wedding was the kind that follows a slammed door loud in its own way, even if no one else noticed it. I drove away without looking back. The echo of laughter and music trailing behind me like something I'd forgotten to pack. My phone buzzed once, then twice, but I ignored it. I had nothing to say, and I doubted anyone was calling for me anyway. At home, the house felt smaller than usual. I set my shoes by the door and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. There was no one to ask why I'd come home early, no one to ask if I was all right. I thought about the family photo, the one they'd taken without me. I pictured them smiling, arms linked, the new couple at the center. I wondered if anyone noticed I was missing, or if my absence made the picture easier to arrange. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages. There were a few from distant relatives, all generic and cheerful. What a beautiful day, so happy for the family. Nothing addressed to me, nothing that hinted at what had happened. I set the phone down and pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to block out the image of my son, standing between his father and his new wife, grinning for the camera. The next morning, I woke up early, not because I wanted to, but because sleep felt impossible. My mind replayed the moment I realized the photo was happening without me. I'd been talking to an old friend from work, someone I hadn't seen in years. When I saw the photographer gathering everyone, I walked over, expecting to be waved in, but no one called my name. The group shifted, made space for others, and the photographer snapped the picture. I stood at the edge, waiting for someone to notice, but no one did. After a few minutes, I turned and walked away. Now, in the quiet of my kitchen, I wondered if I should have said something. Should I have demanded to be included? Should I have stopped the photographer, called out to my son? The questions circled in my head, each one heavier than the last. I thought about calling him, but I didn't know what I would say. Why didn't you notice I was missing? Did you even want me there? The words felt childish, but the hurt was sharp and real. I tried to distract myself with chores. I washed the dishes, wiped down the counters, folded laundry that didn't need folding. Each task felt pointless, a way to fill the hours until I could sleep again. I checked my phone every so often, hoping for a message from my son, an apology, an explanation. Nothing came. By midday, the ache in my chest had settled into something dull and familiar. I went for a walk around the block, nodding to neighbors I barely knew. The world moved on, indifferent to my absence. When I got home, I made tea and sat by the window, watching cars pass. I thought about the years I'd spent raising my son. The birthday parties, the scraped knees, the late night talks about nothing and everything. I wondered when I'd become invisible. That evening, my ex-husband called. His voice was casual, almost cheerful. He asked if I'd made it home all right, if I'd enjoyed the wedding. I waited for him to mention the photo, to ask why I'd left without saying goodbye. He didn't. Instead, he talked about how beautiful the ceremony was, how happy our son looked. I listened, nodding even though he couldn't see me. When he paused, I said I was tired and needed to rest. He wished me good night and hung up. After the call, I sat in the dark, phone in hand. I scrolled through social media, looking for any sign of the family photo. It was already posted. Dozens of likes and comments piling up. What a beautiful family. So much love in one picture. I studied the faces, searching for any sign that they missed me. There was none. I closed the app and set the phone Aside, the next day, I tried to go about my routine. I went to the grocery store, exchanged pleasantries with the cashier, picked up a few things I didn't need at home. I unpacked the bags and put everything away with care. I tried to read, but the words blurred together. I turned on the television, but nothing held my attention. In the afternoon, my sister called. She asked if I was all right, said she'd noticed I left early. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. I told her I was fine, just tired. She didn't press before hanging up. She said, "It was a beautiful day, wasn't it?" I agreed, though the words tasted bitter. That night, I wrote a letter to my son. I didn't send it. I wrote about the day he was born, how I'd felt holding him for the first time. I wrote about the little moments teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, listening to his dreams for the future. I wrote about the wedding, about standing at the edge of the crowd, waiting to be seen. I wrote that I loved him. Even if he'd forgotten how to see me. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. Maybe one day I'd give it to him, maybe not. The days blurred together. I went to work, did my job, came home. I answered messages from friends, all surface level and safe. No one asked about the wedding. No one asked how I was. I didn't volunteer the information. One evening, I received a message from my son. It was brief. "Hope you got home safe. Thanks for coming." I stared at the words, unsure how to respond. I typed and deleted several replies before settling on, "I'm glad you're happy." He didn't write back. I spent the weekend cleaning the house, rearranging furniture, trying to create a sense of order. I found old photo albums, flipped through pages of birthdays and holidays, family trips and quiet moments. In every picture, I was there, always at the edge, always watching. I wondered when I'd stopped being at the center of his life. I wondered if I'd ever been there at all. As the week went on, the ache in my chest faded, replaced by a kind of numbness. I went through the motions, did what was expected. I smiled when I was supposed to, laughed at the right moments. Inside, I felt hollow. One night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. I thought about the family photo, about my place in it all, rather, my absence. I realized I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't make them see me if they didn't want to, but I could decide what came next. The days after the wedding stretched on, each one as unremarkable as the last, but the ache inside me only grew sharper. I moved through my routines: work, errands, polite conversations with neighbors, feeling like a ghost in my own life. No one asked about the wedding. No one asked about me. I told myself that was a blessing. But the truth was, I wanted someone to notice. I wanted someone to ask why I looked tired, why my voice sounded thin, why I flinched when I saw a family laughing together in the park. I tried to convince myself that leaving the wedding without a word had been the right decision. I replayed the moment again and again, the photographer gathering everyone, the laughter, the way my son's arms slipped easily around his new wife's shoulders. I remembered standing on the edge of the group, waiting for someone to call my name, to wave me in. No one did. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe they hadn't seen me, that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But the memory was stubborn, refusing to be softened by excuses. One evening, after another silent dinner, I sat at the table and stared at my phone. I scrolled through the photos posted online. The ones from the wedding. There was my son, radiant with happiness, surrounded by family, my family, except for me. I looked for myself in the background, searching for any sign that I had been there at all. There was nothing. It was as if I had never existed. I thought about calling my son, about asking him why I had been left out, but the words caught in my throat. I imagined his confusion, his denial, the awkward silence that would follow. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want to be told it was an accident. I wanted to matter enough that my absence would have been impossible to ignore. Week went by, my sister called, her voice bright and brisk. She asked if I was all right, if I needed anything. I said I was fine. She hesitated, then mentioned the wedding. It was beautiful, wasn't it? I agreed, my voice steady. She didn't mention the photo. Neither did I. We talked about the weather, about her grandchildren, about nothing at all. When we hung up, I felt more alone than ever. I began to wonder if I had always been invisible. I thought back to other family gatherings, other milestones, birthdays, holidays, graduations. I remembered organizing, cooking, cleaning, making sure everyone was comfortable. I remembered standing at the edge of the group, watching everyone else laugh and celebrate. I wondered if anyone had ever noticed how hard I tried to make things perfect. I wondered if anyone cared. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. She asked about the wedding, her eyes bright with curiosity. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. It was a lovely day, I said, forcing a smile. She nodded, satisfied. I wanted to tell her the truth, to say that I had never felt so alone, that I had left without saying goodbye, because I couldn't bear to be invisible for one more minute. But I didn't. I changed the subject, asked about her grandchildren, her garden, anything but myself. That night, I sat in bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about the letter I had written to my son, the one I hadn't sent. I wondered if I should try again, if I should reach out and tell him how much his actions had hurt me. But I was afraid. Afraid of being dismissed, of being told I was overreacting, of being made to feel small. I wondered if it was better to say nothing, to let the silence stretch on, to protect myself from further pain. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a walk. The streets were quiet, the world still half asleep. I let my mind wander, thinking about the choices I had made, the paths I had taken. I wondered if I could have done things differently, if I could have made myself more visible, more important. I wondered if it was too late to change anything. When I returned home, there was a message from my son. It was short, polite, distant. Hope you're well. Thanks again for coming. I stared at the words, feeling a fresh wave of hurt. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I wanted to ask him about the photo, about why he hadn't noticed I was missing. I wanted to tell him how much it hurt to be left out. But I didn't. Instead, I wrote, "I'm glad you're happy," and left it at that. The days blurred together. I kept busy, filling my time with chores and errands. I tried to focus on the present, to let go of the past, but the memory of the wedding lingered, a constant ache just beneath the surface. I wondered if my son ever thought about me, if he ever noticed my absence in the family photo. I wondered if he cared. One evening, I received a call from my ex-husband. His voice was cheerful, almost oblivious. He talked about the wedding, about how beautiful everything had been. He didn't mention the photo. He didn't ask why I had left early. I listened, nodding along, feeling the distance between us grow wider with every word. After the call, I sat alone in the dark, the silence pressing in around me. I realized that I couldn't keep waiting for someone else to notice me, to validate my feelings, to make me feel seen. I had to find a way to move forward, to reclaim my sense of self-worth. I didn't know how, not yet, but I knew I couldn't stay stuck in this place forever. I stood up, took a deep breath, and began to make a plan. I would start small. I would reach out to friends, reconnect with people who valued me. I would find new ways to fill my days, new sources of joy and meaning. I would learn to see myself, even if no one else did. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a flicker of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was enough. I knew the road ahead would not be easy. I knew there would be days when the ache would return, when the memories would threaten to overwhelm me, but I also knew that I was stronger. Then I realized I had survived being invisible. Now I would learn how to be seen. I never imagined that the hardest part of being left out would be the days that followed, not the moment itself. The world didn't pause for my pain. I went to work, answered emails, made dinner, and kept up with the small rituals that hold a life together. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time I saw a family together at the supermarket or heard someone mention a wedding, the memory returned, sharp and insistent. I tried to push it away, but it clung to me, a silent companion. One afternoon, I opened the drawer where I'd hidden the letter to my son. I read it again. Tracing the words I'd written in a moment of raw honesty, the letter was full of memories his. Childhood laughter, the way he used to run to me when he was scared, the quiet pride I felt at every milestone. It was also full of questions I was too afraid to ask out loud. Why didn't you see me? Did I matter to you that day? I folded the letter and put it back. I wasn't ready to send it. Not yet. Instead, I tried to reclaim my days. I signed up for a pottery class at the community centre, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. The first class was awkward. My hands were clumsy, the clay uncooperative. But the instructor was patient, and the other students welcomed me. For a few hours each week, I focused on shaping something new, on creating rather than remembering. It didn't erase the pain, but it dulled the edges gradually. I started reaching out to old friends. I invited my neighbor for coffee, called my sister just to chat. I didn't talk about the wedding. I didn't mention the photo. Instead, I listened to their stories. Let their laughter fill the quiet spaces in my home. It was a relief to be seen, even if only in small ways, but the ache returned at night. I lay awake, replaying the wedding in my mind. I remembered the way my son had looked at his bride, the joy in his eyes. I wondered if he'd noticed I was gone. I wondered if he cared. I told myself I shouldn't need his validation, that I should be strong enough to move on. But the truth was, I missed him. I missed the closeness we once shared, the easy conversations, the feeling of being needed. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, my phone rang. It was my son. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I answered, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was hesitant, uncertain. I just wanted to check in. I realized we didn't really get to talk at the wedding. I swallowed hard. It was a busy day, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was a pause. I saw some of the photos online, he said quietly. I realized you weren't in the family picture. I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. I closed my eyes, the hurt resurfacing. I was there, I said softly. I was waiting to be called in. But it never happened. He was silent. For a moment, I'm really sorry, Mom, I should have noticed. I guess I got caught up in everything. I wanted to tell him how much it hurt, how invisible I'd felt. But I could hear the regret in his voice, the uncertainty. I didn't want to make him feel worse. It's all right, I said, though it wasn't. I'm glad you had a good day. He hesitated. Are you angry with me? I thought about it. Was I angry? Or just sad? I'm hurt, I admitted. But I don't want that to be the only thing between us. He let out a breath. I don't either. I want you to be part of my life. Mom, I'm sorry I made you feel otherwise. We talked for a while longer, about the wedding, about his new life, about small things that didn't matter but somehow did. When we hung up, I felt lighter. The ache was still there. But it was no longer the only thing I felt. That night, I took out the letter and read it one last time. Then I tore it up. I didn't need it anymore. I had said what mattered. I had been heard. In the days that followed, I kept going to my pottery class, kept reaching out to friends, kept building a life that was mine. The pain of being left out didn't vanish. But it became a part of my story, not the whole of it. I learned that being seen starts with seeing myself, with valuing my own place in the world, even when others forget. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. The morning after our conversation, I woke up with a sense of quiet resolve. The ache that had lingered for so many days was still there, but it had softened, replaced by something steadier. I moved through my routine differently, not with the heaviness of someone overlooked, but with the awareness that I had survived the worst of it and was still standing. At work, I found myself listening more closely to colleagues. Noticing the small ways people tried to connect, I realized how often I'd dismissed these gestures before, to focus on my own pain, to appreciate the world around me. I started saying yes to invitations: a lunch here, a walk there. I let myself be present, even if only for a few moments. At a time, my pottery class became a small sanctuary. Each week, I shaped the clay with more confidence, letting my hands learn what my heart was still discovering, that I could create something new from what was left behind. The instructor complimented my progress, and I shared a laugh with classmates over our lopsided bowls and crooked mugs. It wasn't about perfection, it was about being there, about trying. My relationship with my son changed, too. We began to talk more often, sometimes about everyday things, sometimes about nothing at all. There were still awkward silences, still moments when the memory of the wedding hovered between us, but we didn't avoid it. He apologized again, in small ways: a thoughtful message, a shared photo from his new life, an invitation to dinner. I accepted, not because it erased the past, but because I wanted to move forward. The first time I visited his new home, I felt a knot of anxiety. The memory of the wedding photo was still raw, but I reminded myself that I belonged here, too. When I arrived, he greeted me with a warm hug. His wife welcomed me in, offering tea and asking about my pottery. We sat together, talking and laughing, the three of us forming a new kind of family. I noticed a photo on the mantel, one from the wedding, but this time I was in it. He had found a candid shot, just the two of us, and framed it. It wasn't the official family portrait, but it was real, and it was ours. That evening, as I left their house, my son walked me to the car. He hesitated before speaking. "I know I can't change what happened, Mom, but I want you to know how much you mean to me. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just my son, but a man learning. Just as I was, we're both figuring this out, I said. What matters is that we keep trying, driving. Home, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The pain of being left out would never fully disappear, but it no longer defined me. I had found my own place again, not just in my son's life, but in my own. In the weeks that followed, I continued to build on the small changes I'd started. I spent time with friends, explored new interests, and let myself enjoy moments of solitude without feeling lonely. I learned to recognize my own worth, to see myself not as an afterthought, but as someone deserving of space, love, and recognition. The story of the wedding photo became just one chapter in a much larger story, one of resilience, forgiveness, and quiet growth. I realized that belonging isn't always given. Sometimes it's something you claim for yourself, one imperfect, hopeful day at a time.